There are three men who have already decided you will be replaced. You have not noticed yet. You will not notice until it is finished. By the time you understand what happened, your title will belong to one of them. Your office, your authority, the respect you spent a decade building, the trust you assume was permanent. How much have you bled for what you're about to lose? By the end of this video, you will know how to identify these three men in your own life. You will know which one is closest to executing. You will know what Junius Brutus understood about playing the fool that saved his life and ended a king. You will know what Tiberius saw from Capri that Caesar refused to see from Rome. Walk with me into a chamber on the morning of March 15, 44 BC. A man is leaving his home. He has been warned 3 times in the past 24 hours. A soothsayer told him to beware the day. His wife dreamed of his death and begged him not to attend the Senate. A note placed in his hand contained the names of the men who would kill him within the hour. He held the note. He did not read it. Julius Caesar walked into the Curia of Pompey believing he understood the men around him. He had pardoned Brutus. He had pardoned Cassius. He had extended mercy to dozens of men who had fought against him in the civil wars. He had spared their families. He had returned their estates. He had elevated them to positions they could not have earned without his hand. Caesar believed mercy bought loyalty. He was wrong. 23 knife wounds later, Caesar lay dead on the Senate floor. The men who killed him were not strangers. They were not enemies he had failed to defeat. They were men he had defeated and forgiven. Men he had elevated. Men whose names he knew. Men whose children he had blessed at family banquets. You came here because something feels wrong. The respect you used to receive is being subtly withdrawn. The information you used to get first is reaching you last. The decisions you used to be consulted on happen before you arrive. The relationships you thought were stable have begun to feel transactional. You feel it. You cannot prove it. This video will name what you feel. 3 men, 3 patterns, 3 signatures of replacement that operate underneath conversation, underneath friendship, underneath every reassurance you have been given. Stop bleeding authority you have not yet noticed losing. A man who used to ask for your input now reports your decisions to others as if he made them himself. Tiberius Caesar understood this signature before anyone else in Rome. He watched Sejanus rise through the imperial guard for 15 years. Sejanus was loyal. Sejanus was useful. Sejanus knew every secret Tiberius had. Tiberius elevated him because every emperor needs a man who can execute orders that cannot be written down. Every prince needs a hand that knows how to hold a knife without being seen holding it. By the year 31 AD, Sejanus had married into the imperial family through Tiberius's own arrangement. He had eliminated rivals through legal proceedings that always seemed to favor him. He had made himself indispensable to the daily operation of the empire. The Senate had voted statues of him erected next to Tiberius across the city. Most observers in Rome believed Sejanus was the second most powerful man in the empire. Some believed he was the first with Tiberius, merely the symbol. Tiberius was watching from Capri. He saw something specific. He saw Sejanus signing documents that should have required imperial seal. He saw Sejanus making appointments in his name that he had not authorized. He saw senators visiting Sejanus's villa before they visited Tiberius. He saw the small shifts in language at court where men began saying Sejanus and Tiberius rather than Tiberius alone. He saw the order of names change in correspondence. He saw the seating arrangements at state dinners gradually rearrange themselves around a new center of gravity. The quiet successor had begun to act like the actual ruler. The transition was already underway, and Sejanus believed Tiberius was too distracted by his retreat from public life to notice. Here is what most men miss about this signature. The quiet successor never announces himself. He never says, "I want your position." That would trigger your defenses immediately. Instead, he simply begins behaving as if the position is already his. He answers questions that should come to you. He makes promises that should require your authorization. He builds relationships with people who used to come to you first. He develops opinions on matters that fall under your authority and shares them with people who matter. Each individual action seems small. Each could be explained as initiative, going above and beyond, helpful efficiency, a loyal man trying to lighten his master's load. That is exactly why this signature is so dangerous. It looks like loyalty until the moment it is not. It looks like service until the moment of service ends and what remains is naked succession. Tiberius saw the pattern in Sejanus because Tiberius had done it himself decades earlier under Augustus. He knew the moves from the inside. He knew which gestures were authentic and which were preparation. Most targets of this pattern do not have that prior experience, and they explain away every signal until the day they discover their authority has been transferred without their consent, often without their knowledge. How many decisions have happened in your office this month that you should have been consulted on but were not? Count them. That number is the velocity of your replacement. Now ask yourself a harder question. When was the last time someone asked you for your input on a decision that fell within your authority, not because they needed your permission, because they assumed your authority still mattered enough to consult? If you cannot remember, the transition is further along than you realize. But the quiet successor is the easiest one to spot. The next sign hides itself inside what looks like loyalty, the wolf or the dog. You will know which one you have been by the next sentence. The quiet successor cannot be confronted directly. Confrontation reveals you noticed. Once he knows you noticed, he accelerates. This is the mistake most men make. They feel the shift. They confront. They demand explanations. They ask for meetings. The quiet successor responds with apologies, with reassurances, with promises to consult you next time. He performs contrition perfectly because he has prepared for this conversation. And then he moves twice as fast, because now he knows the clock is real. Tiberius did not confront Sejanus for months. He sent letters that contained both praise and criticism designed to confuse. He let Sejanus believe his ascent continued. He prepared a single decisive move while letting Sejanus prepare nothing in return. He cultivated alternative loyalties in the Praetorian Guard that Sejanus believed answered only to him. This is what the prudent man understands. Once a transition has begun, you cannot reverse it through conversation. You can only end it through action. And action requires preparation that the target must not see. The man who warns his enemy before striking is the man who teaches his enemy how to strike first. On the morning of October 1831, A.D. Sejanus walked into the Senate expecting honors. Tiberius had sent word that a great announcement awaited him. Instead, a letter from Tiberius was read aloud, beginning with praise and slowly turning paragraph by paragraph into accusation. By the end of the letter, Sejanus was named a traitor. He was strangled within hours. His body was thrown down the Gemonian stairs and torn apart by the Roman crowd that had cheered his statues weeks before. Note what happened. Tiberius did not announce his suspicions. He did not warn Sejanus. He did not give him a chance to explain. By the time Sejanus understood what was happening, his fate was already determined by men who had moved while he slept. Here is what you do not do this week. Do not call him out. Do not warn him you have seen the pattern. Do not reduce his responsibility suddenly. Each of these actions reveals what you know without changing what he can do. Each accelerates his timeline against you. Instead, document every decision he made without you, every meeting you should have been in, every piece of information that arrived to you last. Build the case before you act on it. Then identify the decision maker above both of you, the person whose support he relies on. Begin building your relationship with that person without mentioning him at all. By the time you act, the support he believes he has should already be yours. The man who feigns subordination while preparing succession is destroyed not by argument, but by surprise. Stop announcing your suspicions. A close friend has begun asking detailed questions about your work that he never asked before. Cassius Longinus understood the value of intelligence gathering. In the months before the assassination of Caesar, Cassius did not openly conspire. He did not give speeches. He did not write manifestos. He did not threaten. He asked questions. He asked Brutus about his ancestor, the original Junius Brutus, who had ended the Tarquin kings of Rome. He asked senators about their positions on imperial power. He asked Caesar's own attendants about his schedule, his routines, his security arrangements. He asked Caesar's military officers about troop loyalties in the legions. He asked Caesar's financial advisors about the state of the treasury. He asked Caesar's wife's servants about her dreams. He asked everyone everything, and no single question by itself seemed dangerous. None of these questions seemed political at the moment they were asked. Each one was reconnaissance. Cassius understood a principle most men never grasp. Men who plan replacement need information their target does not realize they are providing. The questions arrive in friendly conversation. They concern matters that seem incidental. They are remembered with surgical precision. They are cross-referenced against other sources. They are mapped into patterns the speaker would never have shared if he understood the map being drawn. The hardest part of recognizing this signature is that the questions feel flattering. The man asking seems genuinely interested in you and your work and your judgment. You feel valued. You feel heard. You feel the small ego pleasure of being asked your opinion by someone whose attention you value. You feel important. You feel like the older mentor figure to a younger man who is finally learning what matters. That feeling is the bait. The flattery is the hook. The interest you receive is exactly proportional to the danger you face. Have you found yourself recently explaining details of your role to someone who already seemed to know enough? Have you walked away from a casual coffee feeling slightly emptied of information? Have you noticed that the questions, when assembled in your memory, would constitute a complete map of how to execute against you? Have you thought about how strange it is that this person who has known you for years suddenly wants to know things about your routines, your weaknesses, your alliances? That feeling has a name. You have just been debriefed. The friend who asks too many questions is preparing to either replace you or sell your information to someone who will, the pawn or the player. Notice which role you are filling in his project right now. Most men, when they finally recognize the pattern, do one of two things. They either confront the friend directly, which destroys their last source of intelligence on what is being planned, or they shut down and refuse to answer any questions, which alerts the friend that the operation has been detected and forces him to accelerate or change channels. Both responses are wrong. Both responses tell the operator that the operation has been detected. Both responses force him to act on a faster timeline than the one he had planned for. The counter move is precise. Do not refuse to answer. Refusal flags awareness. Instead, give partial answers. Give answers that contradict each other slightly. Give answers that contain small inaccuracies you can later verify whether he repeated to others. Give answers that send him chasing information that does not exist while you observe which channels his pursuit moves through. This is exactly how Walsingham detected the Babington conspirators in 1586. He did not block their communication with Mary Queen of Scots. He fed them slightly altered information through compromised messengers. When the alterations resurfaced in their correspondence, he had documented proof of the conspiracy and identified every member of the network. The conspirators believed they were communicating in secret. They were communicating through Walsingham's hands, and every word they wrote became evidence of their own guilt. The same principle operated in the courts of Renaissance Italy. The Medici family employed dozens of seemingly innocuous staff who were actually intelligence gatherers. The counter move for any prince was not to dismiss his staff. It was to identify which staff members were feeding intelligence elsewhere, and to use those channels to feed false information back into rival networks. The prince who could control his enemy's information was the prince who controlled his enemy's decisions. For the next 30 days, plant one small inaccuracy in every detailed conversation you have with this person. A wrong date for an upcoming meeting, a wrong figure for a project budget, a wrong name for a contact you mentioned in passing. Write down each inaccuracy you plant. Note who you said it to and when. Then track which inaccuracies come back to you through other channels. The ones that surface tell you who he is feeding. The timing of their resurfacing tells you how recently. Within 60 days, you will have a complete map of his information network and a record of what he has shared with whom. You are not building paranoia. You are building a map. The man who can map his own betrayal in advance is the man who is no longer being betrayed. He is conducting counterintelligence against an operation that does not yet know it has been detected. He has reversed the relationship without changing a single visible behavior. Stop providing reconnaissance to your own replacement. The first two signs are about what they do. Behaviors, patterns, things you can observe if you decide to. The third sign is about who you have become to allow it. There is a question you have been avoiding for months. The question is this: who in your life would benefit if you disappeared next quarter? Not died, disappeared, stepped back, took a sabbatical, got reassigned to a different department, took a leave of absence, decided to focus on family, disappeared in the way men of your stature actually disappear, not dramatically but quietly. If you cannot name 3 names quickly, you have not been paying attention to your own life. If you can name 3 names but you have continued treating those 3 as friends, allies, or trusted colleagues, the problem is no longer them. The problem is you. Most men know who their replacements are. They simply refuse to act on the knowledge. They convince themselves they are being paranoid. They convince themselves loyalty must be assumed. They convince themselves direct action would be unkind. They tell themselves they are being the bigger man by ignoring what they see. They tell themselves trust is a virtue even as the men they trust prepare their burial. What does that conviction tell you about the man you are becoming? Not what does it tell you about your enemies. What does it tell you about you? Junius Brutus, the elder, understood something the men in your life are counting on you not to understand. He lived in the court of Tarquin the Proud for years, pretending to be a fool. He watched his cousins murdered. He watched his country destroyed. He drooled. He stuttered. He played the simpleton so completely that Tarquin believed him to be no threat at all. He waited because acting too early meant dying too early. The moment came when Tarquin's son raped Lucretia, and Lucretia killed herself in front of her father and husband. In that moment, Brutus dropped the mask. He led the revolt that ended the kings of Rome forever. He became the founder of the Roman Republic. The lesson is not that you must wait years to act. The lesson is that the man who acts is the man who has already decided what he will do when the moment arrives. He is not deciding in the moment. He has already decided. The moment is simply when execution occurs. The remaining sign requires you to look at someone you currently call an ally and recalculate what he is. Most men cannot do this. Most men prefer the comfortable lie of assumed loyalty over the cold work of honest assessment. Most men prefer the small daily piece of not seeing over the large eventual piece of seeing clearly. Which version of you is watching this video right now? The man who waits or the man who arrives? A man at your level has been receiving institutional protection that should be flowing to you. This is the most dangerous of the 3 signs because it does not come from him. It comes from above him. The man being protected may not even fully realize the scope of his protection. He simply notices that things go his way. The decisions break in his favor. The opportunities arrive in his email. The introductions happen at the right moments. The doors open when he approaches them. He attributes this to his own talent, which makes him both confident and oblivious. He believes he is the architect of his own ascent. Cardinal Richelieu understood this signature better than anyone in 17th century Europe. As he rose in the French court of Louis XIII, he watched which nobles received small but consistent advantages, a judicial ruling that should have gone the other way, a title granted out of expected sequence, an invitation extended to one rival and not to another, a budget allocation that broke a precedent in someone's favor, a military command given to a man whose record did not justify it. Richelieu noticed these small signals before he noticed the political maneuvering. The protection precedes the move. By the time the maneuvering becomes visible, the decision has already been made by men who never appeared in the official record. Look at the man in your organization who has been receiving small institutional favors that you have not received. He has been invited to a planning meeting you were not invited to. He has been given a budget line that should have been yours. He has been mentioned in an executive email you were not copied on. He has been included in a strategy session about a project that falls within your domain. He has been introduced to clients you have served for years. He has been named in announcements where your name belongs. None of these alone matter. Each could be coincidence. Each could be explained by his initiative or his relationships or simple oversight in your direction. Each could be dismissed as the natural unevenness of corporate life. Together, they signal that someone with more power than both of you has begun positioning him as your replacement. The decision was not his. The decision was made above his head. He may not even know it yet. He may believe he is simply having a good year the way men in his position believe in good years. But the institution has chosen. The protected rival is the hardest to neutralize because the protection is not coming from him. The decider is invisible. You cannot confront him because he does not know he is being positioned. You cannot confront the source of his protection because doing so reveals you have noticed the pattern which accelerates the timeline against you. The conversation itself becomes evidence that you are no longer the right man for the role. The applicant or the decider, you have been one too long. The counter move cannot be against the rival. It must be against the source of his protection. And the source of his protection is rarely your direct superior. It is more often someone 2 levels up or someone in an adjacent department whose opinion carries weight, or sometimes a customer or board member whose preferences shape decisions through informal channels. Sometimes it is a former colleague of your superior whose call gets returned within the hour. Sometimes it is a spouse whose dinner table opinion travels faster than any memo. This is what Talleyrand understood across 5 French regimes. He survived the Revolution, the Directory Napoleon, the Restoration, and the July Monarchy. 5 completely different regimes with 5 completely different power structures. He survived not by being loyal to any of them. He survived by identifying who actually held power in each transition and making himself indispensable to that source before others did. When Napoleon fell, Talleyrand had already spent years making himself useful to the Bourbon claimants in exile. When the Bourbons fell, he had already cultivated relationships with the Orleanist faction. He was never caught with the wrong patron because he had multiple patrons, and his utility to each one was specific and irreplaceable. He understood that the man who serves a regime serves only as long as the regime survives. The man who serves the deciders behind regimes serves across them. Find the actual decider in your situation, not the one with the title, the one whose preferences are being executed. Identify the man whose offhand comment becomes policy 3 weeks later. Identify the woman whose project gets resources that competing projects do not. Identify the executive whose handwriting appears on the documents that move things forward. Identify the advisor whose name appears on no organizational chart, but whose opinion every leader checks before deciding. Then ask one specific question. What does this person currently lack that you can provide that the protected rival cannot? The answer is your move. You are not competing with the rival. You are repositioning relative to the source. By the time the rival realizes the protection has shifted, the decision is already made. He will not even understand why his momentum stopped. He will assume bad luck or corporate politics or his own fatigue. He will not see that the source of his elevation has quietly chosen a different beneficiary. He will continue performing the behaviors that previously brought him favor, not understanding that the favor was never about the behaviors. The decider was always the only person who mattered. The rival was always a downstream effect of the decider's preferences. The man who repositions upstream wins without ever fighting the man downstream. The man who fights the rival exhausts himself defeating an effect while the cause continues to produce new rivals indefinitely. Stop competing for visibility with the wrong people. There are 2 doors in front of you right now. The first door is comfortable. You close this video. You tell yourself, I have been making this too dramatic. You tell yourself the men in your life are not preparing what they appear to be preparing. You tell yourself the patterns you have just heard described do not apply to your specific situation, your specific colleagues, your specific friends. You treat them tomorrow morning the way you treated them yesterday morning. You walk into your version of the Senate believing the morning will resemble every other morning. The second door requires you to do one specific thing this week. Identify one of the three men. The quiet successor reporting your decisions as his own. The friend asking questions that are not friendship. The protected rival receiving favors you have not received. Pick the one whose pattern is most visible right now and begin the work of repositioning before he completes his. Caesar walked into the Senate believing mercy bought loyalty. 23 knife wounds taught the Roman world otherwise. The men who killed him were not strangers. They were men whose names he knew, men he had pardoned, men whose families he had spared, men he had loved as sons. The note he held that morning contained those names. He did not read it. The note in your pocket right now contains a name. You can read it tomorrow morning before you walk into your version of the Senate, or you can keep it folded and discover the names later in a way that no longer matters. The doors look identical from where you are sitting. They will not look identical 6 months from now. 6 months from now, one door will have led you to a stronger position than you currently hold. The other door will have led you to a position that no longer exists, occupied by a man whose name you knew and whose loyalty you assumed. 12 months from now, you will either be the man who acted on what he saw or the man who watched another video and forgot it. Both men exist. Both men are watching this right now. Only one of them does the work tomorrow. If something landed, the next video covers how to position yourself when you have already lost ground. See you there.